We are starting out part 3 in our series, Stand, and there's a QR code up on the screen if you want to follow along during the message today, but also to just know what all is going on with the Crossing Fellowship. How can I get connected? How can I give? How can I serve? What are the songs that we sang this morning? And if you want to take Sunday morning a little bit further, there's discussion questions and everything. You can scan that QR code or go onto the YouVersion Bible app and go to the events and click on the Crossing Fellowship. We just want to equip you to take Sunday morning, Monday through the next Sunday. So it just helps us be more than just 1 hour. It takes it into our entire week. But in this series, we started out talking about standing out, and we looked at the story of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they stood out when their nation was taken captive by Babylon, and they came and they actually kidnapped these guys. They brought them back, and they tried to indoctrinate them into their culture and their beliefs, but they said, no, we have pre-decided we are going to honor God, and it caused them, obviously, to stand out. But as a result of them standing out for choosing to honor God in that way, God blessed them, and they were actually promoted above all of the other people that were there. And then last week, week 2, we talked about standing up, and we looked at the story of where Daniel actually stood up to King Nebuchadnezzar. He confronted him lovingly with grace and humility, and it allowed him to have influence in the king's life. And we were challenged to check our motives when we are able to confront others, especially, I don't know if you guys know this, but we're entering a little bit of a politically charged time in our country. And so entering into that, we need to check our motives. And the motive for confrontation should always be relationship and restoration. That should always be the motive of confrontation. So we were challenged with that last week and kind of looked at that. This week, we're talking about standing strong. And the story from the book of Daniel we're going to talk about, if you maybe grew up in church or around Sunday school or anything, you probably heard or saw this story on a flannel graph. Does anybody know what a flannel graph is? See, there's so few hands up right now, we could reintroduce it and people would think it was brand new, like it's this revolutionary thing. But we're going to be talking about Daniel in the lion's den today. And usually when we tell this story, we tell it in a real childlike way where, Daniel's this young, strapping, bulked up guy, and the lions, they're all like fluffy, like kittens and everything, and Daniel's lounging on the lions and everything, and that's how it all happened. But really, Daniel, at this point in time, he was in his 80s. Like when you look at the timeline of when the kings reigned and when everything happened, he would be in his 80s. And so he's been walking with God for about 8 decades at this point. And the lions, they were real ferocious lions. There's a reason that this king had a den of them and used it as a punishment. I mean, think about house cats. I am convinced that if house cats had an extra 30 to 50 pounds, every single one would kill us. Because I have met one good house cat, and his name is Garage Cat, because he's not even a house cat. I'm serious. Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about. But, so I want to share with you a little bit this morning about the story of Daniel in the lion's den. See, Daniel, before, all the stories we've looked at before, he was serving under King Nebuchadnezzar, or King Nebi, as I called him. But now, in this story, he's serving under King Darius. And Darius, he was like an organizational administrator. Like, he is incredible in his mind and thinking, so much so that he actually looked at the kingdom when he came into reign, and he set up 120, he called them satraps. They were basically kingdom protectors. And then what he did over those 120 that were over the people, he set 3 administrators that were going to be over those satraps. And Daniel was one of those 3. So basically it was the king, those 3, the 120, everyone else. So he established this whole tier system. And he put these 3 administrators over the 120 that were over the rest of the people. And their job, those 3, their job was to protect the king against rebellion and also to guard the financial affairs of the kingdom. Basically, they were going to balance the national checkbook, which wouldn't that be pretty awesome if we had some of those? I don't know. But that was their job. That was their role. And so we're going to jump into the story here in Daniel chapter 6. It says, it pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. And the satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer any loss. Now, Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the entire kingdom. Here we see Daniel standing out once again, serving well. He has these exceptional leadership qualities. I mean, this guy is incredible. And again, all the single ladies are like, where are those guys at now? Like, that would be incredible. This guy who's standing out over everybody else. And King Darius, he sees it and he decides that he's going to elevate Daniel once again in his role. Now, remember, this is Daniel. He has been very outspoken about serving the one true God. And this is in the nation of Babylon, an entire nation that was known for worshiping pagan gods. But just because he disagreed with those that were over him, he's remained faithful to God, and God continued to use Daniel to make an impact in the lives of these rulers who believed and followed different gods than the one that Daniel worshiped. But what this promotion brought with it was a little bit of trouble on the inside. Because, of course, the 2 administrators that were promoted with Daniel, and it was those 3 above, they were a little jealous that, okay, this guy who just was our equal is now all of a sudden going to be our boss. I don't know how I feel about that. And if you know VeggieTales, you grew up, they sang a little song. Oh no, what we gonna do? The king likes Daniel more than me and you. And I could sing the rest because I was homeschooled, but I'm gonna spare you all. That's okay. But they decided that they needed to find a way to bring Daniel down. And what we're gonna see is that Daniel is attacked and yet still is able to stand strong with this supernatural strength that can only come from a long-term, well-developed faith relationship with God. And in this, we can see, looking at the story of Daniel, we can actually see 3 truths that can help us be able to stand strong as well today. So the first one that we're going to see is when God raises you up, expect people to tear you down. When God raises you up, you can expect people to tear you down. When people do what God calls them to do in a world that's infected by sin, why would we expect anything else to happen? Remember, Daniel is in Babylon, a kingdom that worships pagan gods. What do we think is going to happen when he takes a stand for the one true God? See, our battle is not against flesh and blood. It's against the powers of this dark world. And when the kingdom of God is moving forward and God is calling you to take a stand for his kingdom, we better expect resistance from the prince of darkness. What else do we think is going to happen? Here's the deal, though. If you are not ready to face opposition for your obedience to God, you probably aren't ready to be used by him. Which I know, that sounds really harsh. Why would I say that? Because when we fear opposition, we forget that God is greater. When we fear opposition, we forget that God is greater than the opposition that we're facing. Satan has power, but God has more. Satan is bound. God is not. We forget how powerful our God is, and if we are more concerned about the enemy working against us than we are the God working in us, our faith is in the wrong place. When God calls us to stand and further his kingdom, there will be opposition. There will be. We need to just expect it and know that it will happen. Don't worry when you face opposition. Worry when you're not facing opposition, because that might mean you're not living and doing what God calls you to do. You're not going to face opposition when you're going with the current of the rest of the world. But when you take a stand and move against the ways of this world, there's going to be opposition. There's going to be people who aren't happy. And look at what happened with Daniel here. So at this, the administrators, the satraps, they tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. And finally, these men said, all right, we're never going to find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God. They're like, all right, if we can't find anything against this guy, we need to run some political ads or something so he's not going to be promoted by the king. Like, they couldn't find anything against Daniel at all. And they're like, we tried to dig up some dirt. We tried to figure this all out. We tried to see, but he has served his God so faithfully, we can't find anything to use against him unless maybe it has something to do with his relationship with God. And so what they did is they devised a scheme to attack him. And Daniel, he's standing out for honoring God. And sure enough, there's opposition. And this opposition, basically, they went to the king, they went to King Darius, and they tried to butter him up, which I don't know how you really butter up a king back then. They were probably like, whoa, Darius, you've been working out? That robe is so tight fitting on you. That's looking pretty good. Are you wearing the new Air Moses sandals? Whoa, King Darius is killing it. I'm sorry for that last line. I don't know. I try to connect with the youngins, you know. It just, I don't know. Slay, is that the right word? There. Okay, see, I got him. There we go. Respect the drip. There, I know that one. But they were like, man, King Darius, you are so great. You are so awesome. I mean, you are the best king above all the other kings. You know what you should do? You should actually set out a decree. Because you're so awesome, you should make a decree that says that no one can bow down or pray to any other god or human except for you for like the next 30 days. Like, that's how awesome you are. And if they do, I don't know, they'll be like thrown into the den of lions or something like that. Like, that's how worthy you are. That's how awesome you are. And they're buttering him up, and they're like, hey, let's just kind of build him up a little bit and pitch him this idea. And Darius, he was like most kings. He was pretty prone to pride, because kings, they knew that they weren't deity. They knew that they weren't gods, but man, they love to be treated like gods. And so when he's being buttered up and everything like that, he's like, you know what? I am pretty great. I am pretty awesome. And they could only pray to me for 30 days? That sounds good. You know what? I think I'm going to do that. And he makes this decree. And the administrators knew that Daniel was a man of prayer. They knew that Daniel had a huge devotion to prayer. And so they said, all right, make this decree that says if anybody prays to anyone else or anything else other than you for 30 days, they're going to be thrown into the den of lions. Now, my question is, how many people in the crossing would be thrown into the lions then if that decree was made today? See, here's the thing. They knew, give him 30 days' time, he's going to be caught on day one. They knew that. I feel like if they tried to make that about us, targeting us today, they'd probably be like, well, how about we make it like in the next year if this happens, and then maybe we'll catch him. Because isn't that our approach to prayer? Isn't that our approach to coming before our God, is just every now and then? Now, see, they made this rule and this law because they knew that they were going to catch Daniel. They knew that they had Daniel. And Daniel, he had no idea if God would rescue him. So he's faced with this decision. And from what I can tell, he had three options. The first one was he could just stop praying. I mean, he's in his 80s, and he was like, okay, God, I've been faithful to you for like 80 some years and everything. Look at everything I've done over the course of my life. I think we could take 1 month off and we can still call it good, right? You think that would be okay? Like, God, I'm more effective here alive than in a den of lions, so I'm just gonna skip 1 month. It'll be okay. I still love you. It's okay. And I'm gonna pick back up in about 30 days. So he could have done that. He could have done what maybe most of us would have done. He could have faked it. He could have prayed silently and on his feet. So he's just like standing there at the table by the king, just kind of looking around there like, Daniel, what are you doing? Oh, what? Nothing. Are you praying? No, I'm not. Me? No, I'm not praying. I'm just thinking through some things. You know, that's it. Amen. And he like mumbles it. I don't know what it is. But he could have faked it, or he could have continued to do what he had been doing all along, risking death, risking being thrown into the lion's den, risking his position of second in command over an entire nation. Decree, no decree, it doesn't matter. And that's exactly what he chose to do. But what in the world gave Daniel this kind of faith? Because so many of us walk away from God for far less. What in the world gave Daniel this kind of faith to stand in the face of certain death? And that leads us to the second thought that can encourage us and help us to stand strong, that kneeling to pray is what gives you the strength to stand. Look at what it says in Daniel 6:10. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. And 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God when? Just as he had done before. Man, our first response to trials so often is to panic, not pray. But think about what we often say and what it says about how we value about prayer. Isn't it true that often when we face trials, we try to gain control over it? We try to do everything that we can to try and, make it maybe not quite as bad, or put forth all this effort. So it's really it's okay. It's still a trial, but it's not that bad. And we do everything that we can do. We try to maintain control. And then after that, we say, okay, now all I can do is pray, right? All I can do is pray. I've done everything I can think of. Now my last resort is prayer. And God is probably like, man, I don't know if I like your chances if all you can do is pray. No, our first response needs to be, we can pray. We can pray. We can come boldly before the throne of God with whatever stands in our way. We can come before God, the creator and sustainer of the universe. He hears our prayers. He loves us, and he alone is in control. Why is our response, well, I guess all I can do is pray? No, we can pray. That needs to be our first response, and that's exactly what Daniel did. Once the decree hit, he went to his room, and he did just what he had always done. And it's incredible to see, trial or no trial, his relationship with God was rooted in a regular conversation. And just like he had always done, he entered his room with the windows open and he talked to God. But it wasn't like a, look at me, I'm defying the king's decree and I'm continuing to do this. I know which God is really in control. No, he isn't announcing it to the world. He's simply continuing the conversation with his creator. So we talked about in week 1 the importance of pre-deciding and how Daniel and his friends, they pre-decided how they were going to honor God. They said, I'm not going to eat the food that was offered to pagan gods. They pre-decided that before the food was even offered. So that way when it came, they already knew the answer. The answer was no. But I bet you that Daniel, somewhere in his lifetime, somewhere along the road, he pre-decided how often and in what ways he was going to seek God in prayer. And he said, I'm going to seek him in prayer 3 times a day because I need him. I need his guidance. I need to seek his wisdom regularly throughout the day. See, one of the reasons that so many in the church aren't close with God is because we haven't decided on a plan to talk with him or how to get to know him. And I'll be honest with you, until you are intentional about making a plan and decision on how you're going to grow closer to God, you're probably not going to grow closer to him. If you have no plan, you are planning to fail. If you have no plan on how to grow in intimacy with God, I can almost guarantee you, you're not going to grow in intimacy with God. Growing in intimacy with God does not happen by accident. It doesn't. So just throwing out an action step for us. What is your plan to grow in intimacy with God? What is your plan? And if you don't have one, take time today to make one. It's not just going to happen. Why do we wait until the trial before we cry out to God, say, okay, give me all your armor? He's given us everything that we need and has equipped us to grow in a relationship with him so that way when the trials come, we're already prepared. Why do we wait till we're in the fire before we reach out to God? So what's your plan? To grow in intimacy with him. And if you don't have one, take time today to get to know our Creator and to make a plan. If you have a smartphone, which is about 99.9% of us in here, there's an app called the Bible app that has over 10,000 plans on just about any topic that you could pick. And you could set aside 5 minutes a day. But you know, so often, sports or other things are more important to us and take priority over getting to know our God. I'm not saying those things aren't important. But I'm saying when the trial comes, are we going to be able to cling to Nebraska football? Or are we going to cling to our Creator? We need to choose how we invest our time because we're in a world that's not going to get any better. We need to cling to our Creator deeply and abide in him because this world doesn't need more entertainment. It needs more of Jesus, and it needs more of the church taking serious their relationship with God. That's what will change this world. That's what will change this country, is the church abiding in God. See, back in May of this year, I resolved to read through and study the books of the Bible that were written by Paul because I wanted to seek out his wisdom and what God poured into him and how God used him to impact nations. And so I do that to start my mornings. Now, I'm not perfect, and I don't hit every single morning unless I'm in my normal routine. But let me tell you, starting my day off where the first thing that I seek is the Word of God, where I spend time in prayer for my family, for my daughter, for my wife, for the church, for those who are hurting, it gives me a perspective that this world cannot give. To say, here I am, God, use me, give me your wisdom, not the wisdom from this world. Give me your wisdom, give me your words, use me to do your will. But it takes intentionality, it takes planning and commitment. You do not grow in a relationship with God by accident. We need to be serious about this, church, for the sake of this world. But not just being intentional about it. Look at how he actually prayed. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed. Daniel had the strength to stand before men because he knelt before God. If you have never prayed while kneeling, let me tell you, you are missing out on one of the most powerful postures of humility and surrender. Because kneeling, it carries a sense of reverence to it. It's humility and dependence, bowing down before the King. And sometimes our posture needs to remind our heart of our actual position. See, I love that we are able to talk with God as a faithful friend, as an advisor, as a mentor, as our Father, our loving Father. I love that we can have that relationship with God. But we need to remember that He is our God. There is no one equal to Him. His presence in the Old Testament killed people just with the glory that emanated from Him. We need to remember we are not worthy to be in a relationship with Him. And we need to honor Him. And sometimes we need to get on our knees in a position of reverence and honor to our God. And when we let our physical posture reflect the position of our heart, it's incredible the humility that it can bring. Not every time, I'm not saying always get down on your knees and pray. But sometimes, when we get a little too buddy-buddy with God and forget who He really is, that He sits on the throne, we need to remind ourselves with our physical posture that He is God and we are not worthy. And Daniel, he had predetermined before that he was going to seek God in prayer. And at some point, if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, you are going to be called to take a stand. I don't know how, I don't know when, I don't know where, but if you are following Jesus, you will. It might be breaking up with a boyfriend or girlfriend because they're pushing you sexually. It might be taking a stand at work when everyone else is doing business deals or things unethically. And you're choosing to say, no, I'm not going to do that because it's not right. And they're like, everyone else is doing it. That's just how business is done. That doesn't mean it's the right way or the right thing to do. It might be choosing to prioritize church with your family. So you might say no to like a prestigious travel league of sports for one of your kids or something like that because it would have you out of town every single Sunday. It could be that. And you'll be thinking, well, if I do this, what if my kid doesn't get a scholarship now? Or what if like I know this coach and I know this coach and they talk, and so if I don't do this, then this coach won't play them, and then what's going to happen? Or it could be, well, all of a sudden you're not going to get, what if I don't get promoted because I'm not doing the business deals that my boss is telling me to do? And he's like, hey, I told you to do this. You chose not to do it. Now you're in trouble for it. And you're like, I was just doing what was right. What if that happens? Or what if I break up with this one and I can't find another one? What am I going to do? Daniel would have asked, well, what if the lions eat me? What if God doesn't come through for me? What if God doesn't protect me in this? If I take this stand, what happens if I die? And I wish that I could tell you that it's always going to work out the way that you want it to. I wish I could, but I can't. I can't promise you that everything's going to work out the way that you hope. Because God works and He does things in ways that don't always make sense to us. So I can't promise you that you're not going to face consequences, that someone won't go against you, or you might lose friendships, you might lose a job, that people aren't going to resist you, that you won't be left out or maybe overlooked, or you might end up feeling hurt and feeling worse off. But here's what I can promise you. I can promise you that when you do what's right, you can always trust God with the results. When you do what is right, you can always trust God with the results. Daniel didn't know if he was going to survive being thrown into the lion's den. He didn't know the end of the story in the middle of the story. He had no idea that his face would be on a flannel graph 2,000 years later. He had no idea that we would be talking about him. All he knew was that for his entire life, God had been faithful to him. That was all that he knew. So no matter what Daniel knew or faced, he knew God was faithful, so I will be faithful. That was all he knew. That was all he knew. No negotiations, no ifs and or buts. It was God has always been faithful, so why would I doubt him now? If he saves me, I trust him. If he doesn't save me, I trust him. Because our God is faithful. And King Darius, man, he was tore up over this, and he was so angry that he had been deceived and tricked into throwing his friend, his second-hand man, into the den of the lions. He liked Daniel, but because of the law, he wasn't able to reverse it, because at that time, they believed if there was a decree, it meant that it came from a god. So if he all of a sudden said, hey, a god told me this, so I'm going to decree it, and then 2 days later, he backtracks, they're going to be like, okay, so you don't really have a connection with the God. You have no business leading us. So that's why he couldn't go back on this decree and change it. And Daniel gets thrown into the den of lions. And King Darius, he goes back to the palace and he doesn't eat. He can't sleep because he is devastated, in anguish. And we don't know what exactly happened. I mean, Daniel could have used one of the lions as a pillow. That would be a pretty sweet story to be able to come back and say. He could have been over in the corner in the fetal position. He probably peed his pants or his tunic or whatever he wore. But all we know is that God, in his power, shut the mouths of the lions. And in the morning, at first light, King Darius runs to the lion's den and he cries out and he says, Daniel, Daniel, are you okay? And here's word for word what he says. You can look this up. Has your God, whom you serve continually, rescued you? Even Darius, King Darius, recognized Daniel's faithfulness to serve God. And he says, has your God, whom you continually serve, rescued you? And Daniel answered out, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. And the king was so overjoyed, he gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. When you do what is right, you can always trust God with the results. No matter the outcome, we can trust God because our God is faithful. King Darius, he ended up having the other men and their families thrown into the lion's den. And then he issued a new decree saying that all of the nations should fear the God of Daniel. Now remember this. This all started out as a nation that kidnapped Daniel and his friends. They destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. They destroyed the temple that was for the one true God. They stole all the religious artifacts and they mocked God. And now, through one man remaining faithful to that God, an entire nation is now told by their king the wonders and great things that God has done. From the faithfulness of one man, an entire nation hears about the one true God. Is that not incredible? God can reach and transform hearts, even the ones that we think are never going to turn to him. Let me say that again, because we all have people in our life that maybe we think this about. God can reach and transform hearts, even the ones that we think cannot be reached. And God could use you. God could use you in being faithful to him despite the trials, despite the decrees, despite whatever it is that stands in our way. If we remain faithful to God, he can use you to change hearts of a world around us. What else could we want? To be used by God to transform lives. So if you're facing some opposition, know that if God raises you up, expect people to tear you down. If you're facing opposition for your obedience to God, don't worry. Worry when you're not facing opposition, because that may indicate that you're not following God. And if God raises you up, people will try to tear you down, and kneeling to pray is what gives you the strength to stand firm. If you haven't predetermined how and when you are going to grow in intimacy with God, you probably aren't going to grow in Him. We need to be intentional and make this plan, pre-decide how we are going to grow in a relationship with Him, because it doesn't happen on accident. And when you do what is right, you can always trust God with the results, because our God is faithful. And when we abide in Him, we can stand firm no matter what. No matter the den of lions that stands in our way, we can stand firm because our God is faithful. And some of you right now, you may feel like you aren't able to abide in God. You're like, I feel unworthy because of the things that I've done, the way that I've chosen to live life. You may feel unworthy to come to Him just to live your life and the sins that you have in your life, and you're like, I'm not good enough to abide in God. I'm not good enough to be in a relationship with Him. Well, guess what? Welcome to the club. Because every single one of us has done it. We have all sinned, and I know we as humans, we look at sin and say, my sin's up here, their sin is really, really, really bad. And we put the scale on it. But the punishment for all sin, regardless of where it lands on our human scale, is all the same. And it is death and separation from God. And God paid that punishment for your sin and for my sin. He gave His Son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross for us. And He died on the cross, He was buried, and He rose again, proving that God accepted His payment on our behalf for our sin. And I want you to know this. He loves you. He loves you enough that He sent His Son to die for you, to be in a relationship with Him, to abide in Him. He is love, and you are never too far gone. You can never sin too much for God's forgiveness. He loves you, and He invites you into a relationship with Him. And it says in John 14:6, Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. He is the way that we have access to the Father of love. He is the way that we have access to a relationship with God through His death, through His burial, through His resurrection, for the forgiveness of our sins. We have access to abide in God. And so no, you're not too far. You can't sin too much for God to not love you. He loves you, and He desires a relationship with you. And so if you've never put your faith and trust in Jesus, I urge you to do that this morning, to place your trust in Him, to offer your life to Him, to understand how deeply loved you have done that. Church, we need to live like that. We need to trust God more than just the forgiveness of our sins. We need to trust that we can live a life abiding in the faithfulness of our God. And that is how we have the strength to stand in a world, in a society, in a culture that wants nothing more than for us to sit down and close our mouths. We have the strength to stand when we abide. What are we waiting for? What's holding us back? Dear God, I just pray that you would work in our hearts. Help us to prioritize you. Man, so often we prioritize things that truly don't matter. But God, let us prioritize you and a relationship with you, and to grow in you, to trust in you, to seek your strength, to seek your wisdom. Because God, I can't do this on my own. We can't do this on our own. We need you. Let us grow in a relationship with you. I pray that you would convict us and lay that on our hearts, God, to want to draw near to you each and every day as Daniel did. And God, for those who are here who maybe haven't put their faith and trust in you, I pray that you would draw them to you. God, put people in their way, put things in their way, songs, whatever it is, God. I pray that everywhere they go, they would see you and come to know and understand how desperately they, alongside of all of us, need you each and every second. God, that we would be a church that stands strong because we have a God who is faithful. Just work in us, God. Draw us to you. Thank you so much for loving us, and we pray this all in Jesus'